Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ray Davis Mysterious Encounters channel. And today we are going to be talking about on a part two type of thing. Earlier we had spoken about the copycat Friday the 13th Jason Voorhees killer, which happened in the 1980s, with Mark Branch being the uh, copycat killer. Today we are actually going to do almost a part two of this, where it's about the killings that, while didn't inspire exactly the Friday the 13th series, it has some very eerie similarities to it that it was noticed by a lot of people, and in its country was probably the most famous or infamous murder, of all time, and has never really truly been completely solved. I am talking about the Lake Bodom, Bodom, murders that happened back in the 60s, very early 60s to be exact. This has never really been completely solved either, and when I explain to you kind of what happened, this happened in Finland, of all places. Not in America, where the Friday the 13th series began in 1979, 1980. No, this actually happened many years before that. And the similarities are the participants were actually killed in or around the tent, and it was a very quick, very brutal type of killing, which was reminiscent of the Jason Voorhees, or in this case, maybe his mother's killings. And very quick, very strong. Whoever did it was almost supernaturally strong, so that's very interesting. On the 5th of June 1960, at Bodom Lake in Espoo, Uusimaa, Mila Bjork and Anha Maki, both 15, and Seppo Boisman, 18, were killed by stabbing and blunt force trauma to their heads while sleeping inside a tent. The fourth youth, Niles Gustafsson, then aged 18, was found outside the tent with broken facial bones and stab wounds. Despite extensive investigations, the perpetrator was never identified, and various theories on the killer's identity have been presented over the years. Gustafsson was unexpectedly arrested on suspicion of committing the murders in 2004, but he was found not guilty the following year. Again, this is a very strange case in the brutality of the three individuals that were killed was so quick, very instantaneous. It doesn't look like whoever did it, like that none of the girls could flee. Nobody really got away. That's why the original suspicion kind of fell on Gustafsson. Very interesting. Now, this does predate the Friday the 13th movies, but as you've seen, there's a little bit of a similarity there, particularly to the first film, where in Friday the 13th, Jason's mother, Pamela Voorhees, did the original killings and was able to take out people one at a time, sometimes two at a time, but they had to be separated. But interestingly enough, this is kind of what happened. On June 4th, 1960, four Finnish teenagers had decided to camp along the shores of Lake Bodom near the city of Espoo, Ata Manor. Hope I'm saying this correctly. The two girls, Mila and Anha, were both aged 15 at the time, and they were with their boyfriends, Seppo Antero Boisman and Niles Wilhelm Gustafsson, and both of the boys were 18, so both girls were 15, both boys were 18 at the time. Now, sometime between 4 and 6 a.m., during the early morning hours of Sunday, June 5th, 1960, Mahi, Bjorklund, and Boisman were all stabbed and bludgeoned to death by an unknown assailant. Gustafsson was the only survivor of the massacre and had fractured facial bones that appeared to confirm his story of being a victim. He stated afterwards he had seen the glimpse of an attacker clothed in black with bright red eyes coming for him. And to me, that particular thing is the most unsettling and creepy part of the whole attack thing, whether or not Gustafsson was telling the truth or not. Just the fact that he uttered that phrase, that he red eyes were coming towards him, and that's an extremely weird thing for anyone to say, particularly a potential murder suspect, because nobody's going to believe that. There was never back then anything that would give off like red eyes or anything. That's almost like demonic or something, if he was telling the truth. And again, clothed in black with the red eyes and everything, that's extremely weird. I mean, if you were being accused of a murder, would you make any kind of, and you were innocent, would you make up any kind of thing that would sound that far-fetched? That to me, I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if he's telling the truth or if he really believed that or if he had done it. But if he had done it, if you tell that kind of a cockamamie story to the cops, I'm thinking they're not going to believe that. So I don't know what he saw or who he saw, but the thing of being clothed in black and coming towards them with red eyes is very unsettling and probably the creepiest part of this whole story, to me at least. Besides the murders being extremely fast, extremely aggressive, and it sounds like at least 3 of them didn't have time to get away or couldn't get away. Whatever it was moved very fast, or whoever it was moving very fast with a lot of energy and power and strength. They couldn't do it. And then at about 6 a.m., a group of boys bird watching some distance away, let me see here, reportedly seen the tent collapsed and a blond man walking away from the site. The bodies of the victims were discovered at about 11 o'clock a.m. by a carpenter named Esko Oiva Johansson. He alerted the police, who arrived at the scene at noon. Now, the killer had not injured the victims from inside the tent, but instead had attacked occupants from outside with a knife and an unidentified blunt instrument, possibly a rock, through the sides of the tent. So it looks and sounds to me like they may have been up, or who or whatever was up had made a noise so they would get up. Maybe they hadn't gone to bed quite yet, but either way, they were basically standing up, I would guess. Maybe they were laying down, but it just sounds to me like they may have been awake, and whatever, whoever it was, just stabbed through the tent repeatedly and crushed them over the head. But again, it's pretty amazing that who or whatever did it, had the kind of speed and strength to just, lay all 3 out from inside the tent is quite a trick, I would think, at least. The killer had taken several items which detective found puzzling, including the keys to the victim's motorcycle, which themselves had been left behind. Gustafsson's shoes were partially hidden approximately 500 meters from the murder site. The police did not cordon off the site nor record the details of the scene, later seen as a major error, because then basically people are walking in and out of your crime scene. They're contaminating it with their own footprints, their own hair samples, DNA. Just a really bad mistake. Again, it was the 1960s, so nobody, I guess, probably thought in those terms yet. But it actually became worse because they called in soldiers to come assist with the search for the missing items, several of which were never found. Björklund, Gustafsson's girlfriend, she was found undressed from the waist down and was lying on top of the tent and had suffered the most injuries out of all the victims. She was stabbed multiple times after her death, whilst the other 2 teenagers were slain with less brutality. Gustafsson was also found laying on the top of the tent. There's been numerous suspects. There was a man named Vladimir Gloistrom. Again, these names aren't really in my native tongue, so I can't really say if I was correct in pronouncing any of them. He was a kiosk keeper from Oiten, known to have been hostile towards campers. Now, the police didn't find any hard evidence of it, that he had anything to do with it. They were skeptical of confessions that he had made because they considered him disturbed, and he drowned in Lake Bodom in 1969, most likely by suicide. The people in town knew Gloistom was violent, cut down tents, threw rocks at people, and some had later said that Gloistom, they saw him coming back from the murder scene, but they were too afraid to call the police. The police never recovered DNA from Gloistom. A book released in 2006 brings up the theory in detail. The book also claims that the police almost immediately ignored much more evidence that was previously unknown to the public because of language barriers, among other things. Again, there's some striking parallels here between the Friday the 13th first movie and this guy's death. Like, they both drowned in a lake, had drowned in a lake. Jason Voorhees had drowned in a lake, and evidently this guy did, possibly by suicide. Nobody really knows. Again, now most people thought there was a guy named Hans Assmann. Almost sounds like Ass Man. I don't want to make a Seinfeld reference here, but he lives several kilometers from the shore, and a lot of books tend to think that he was the one that did it. It wasn't, again, taken seriously by the police. He had an alibi for the night. On the morning of June 6, 1960, however, he had shown up at a hospital in Helsinki with bloody clothes. Hans was also a suspect in 5 other cases, even confessing one on his deathbed. So at the very least, I found with a lot of these true crime things is that there's usually other suspects within the area just by coincidence, which is very creepy in and of itself, that at any point in your life there could be at least 2 serial killers circling the area. So if he didn't do it, he was a very prime suspect as well. During the 1960s, there was an individual named Pindi Soyman who was known for being very violent. A lot of people kind of thought he did it. He claimed to a fellow inmate that he was responsible for heinous crimes that occurred at Lake Bodom. However, a significant piece of evidence challenged the notion of him being, the guy that did it was his age. During the time of the attack, he was only 14 years old. So, even though this guy had said that he had done things by there, he didn't actually say he had murdered anyone, and his age being 14, doesn't seem like he could have overpowered all them. And then many, many years later, in March 2004, almost 44 years after that, the Finnish National Bureau of Investigation had said that they declared that the case was solved, and they arrested Niels Gustafsson. They felt he was drunk, and they threw him, and that the others had threw him out of the tent, and that he attacked the other boy, and all that happened during it, and then he killed the girls. And so they started the trial, and the Gustafsson's lawyers argued that the murders were the work of one or more outsiders, and that Gustafsson would have been incapable of killing 3 people given the extent of his injuries. It had always been known that the shoes worn by the killer and hidden 500 yards away from the tent belonged to Gustafsson. Modern DNA analysis was significant for the prosecution, as it showed that the 3 murdered victims' shoes were on Gustafsson's shoes, but Gustafsson's was completely absent. The prosecution said it followed from the lack of Gustafson's blood on the shoes, that his injuries had occurred at a different time to the attack on the murdered victims, and the only explanation could be that he had done the murder himself. And then pretended to be unconscious. The prosecution tried to, make it more of a thing where they were alleging there was an identification of him by two bird watchers. Gustafson was also a tall man, and just a lot of strange things that they couldn't quite make stick, because on October 7th, 2005, he was acquitted of all charges. The court explained the verdict as due to the prosecution evidence being inconclusive, failed to show Gustafson had a motive appropriate to the crime of such seriousness, and given that the time had elapsed, it was impossible to find out. Again, this is very, very strange in that it does seem to parallel a lot of the early parts of Friday the 13th Part 1, not any of the sequels. But, nobody really did find out exactly who did it. And as you probably know, or anyone who follows true crime will realize, is that at any point there can be tons of disturbed individuals that were also around the area. And some are so disturbed that they'll admit that they did it even if they didn't. So you have that. You have fake copycats. All kinds of things. But it's a very interesting case, and while it didn't directly influence Friday the 13th, the movie in and of itself, there are some striking parallels to it. And I thought it was a very interesting case. And again, this is the Lake Bodom murders in Bodom Lake on June 5th, 1960. And it's just like I said, this is a very interesting case. It doesn't get anywhere near the publicity that I feel that it kind of should for what it is. That was very early in their career as, police officers to have to deal with that. So, it's a very strange case that was never solved to anyone's complete satisfaction. And the parallels with at least the first Friday the 13th movie are kind of there a little bit. And like I said before, I find the most unsettling part of it is Gustafson saying that something, was approaching them with a black hood on and, dressed all in black and red glowing eyes. To me, even at the 18, you wouldn't tell the cops that, even if you were wrong or right, or you were innocent or guilty, you just wouldn't say that unless he obviously saw something that really scared him or spooked him. It's a very interesting story, a very interesting case. Okay, folks, thank you so much for tuning in again. I hope you all enjoyed the latest Ray Davis Mysterious Encounters podcast, and I hope you have a great night, and thank you, everyone. Take care.